Let me introduce our first speaker. Cara Erigel Rabat, an actress, a voice talent, a social media influencer, a radio host turned podcaster, among other things. Her filmography includes Illumina, Super Inday and the Golden Bibe, and finally Found Someone. Aside from being one of the most eloquent and gorgeous babes on your screen, she has the distinction of being someone's first kiss in this very room. And it's true. But later na yan. Seriously, you should watch her TikTok videos. You will realize that all that time, working with Sarah Geronimo, John Lloyd, Marian Rivera lang naman, Jeffrey Hidalgo, and Jake Cuenca has not stopped this girl from making fun of herself, turning her into such an endearing brand to learn from. Ladies and gentlemen, Cara Erigel. Hi! Can I shout like, woo! Alright!
Ayan,
Ayan na wala. Ulit. Again.
Okay, wait. Tell me again. Cara Erigel.
Again. Yeah! Oh, guys! Shout, guys! Woo!
Hi! Hello, everybody. Hi, Simon.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so
Let
excited.
me introduce my next speaker. How do I start to describe Edric Mendoza? When he is such a superhero to a lot of people. He's a change maker and an innovator in the education arena, especially during the pandemic when all parents, including me, learned how to homeschool by default. But flashback a couple of years ago, he transitioned, Cara, from his 10-year stint in the corporate world into being a television and media personality in 2012. He was right there with me when we kicked off the show On the Money for the ABS-CBN News Channel. And in 2017, however, he left when he needed to be a serious edupreneur and is now, in fact, the chairman of Homeschool Global and managing director of The One School. But while he left the show, he didn't stop pursuing his passion of changing the world one family at a time through teaching family values, innovative education, and personal finance. But here's a fun fact. He blushed when Spot.ph called him the cutest anchor in the country. I know, I was there. Ladies and gentlemen, Edric Mendoza. Woo! Okay, we should dance
I can't believe you said that. You actually disclosed the cutest news anchor piece. My goodness, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun.
Yes. And finally, Tony Pet Sarmiento, the Chief Creative Officer and Managing Director of Screen and Surface, is like the male Black Widow of the advertising world. What do you think of that? He has worked with all the big guys, Publicis, Ogilvy, Saatchi, BBDO, and Gray for brands like Pepsi, Pizza Hut, PLDT, Smart, Globe, URC, Unilab, and Unilever. Para akong natang twister doon. Guys, rotary na lang ang kulang! And the result of his work has been recognized here and around the world. Ano, Tony Pet, can you do a Black Widow pose for us? Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Pet Sarmiento! Tumatawa siya backstage.
That's your move. That's your move.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad to have the three of you in my panel today. We're going to talk about a lot of things, so let's dive into this straight head on. I want to ask Cara, you felt weird about turning 30. Guys,
Let's dive right in.
Dive right in. Actually, hindi pala yun. Yung una kong itatanong, who is this person in this room? Who was your first kiss?
Yeah, we were asking that backstage too, right?
Guys, in the comment section in Facebook,
May
you
prize yung
comment?
nakakahula.
May prize ba? May prize. Can you like guess who is this Cara's first kiss, who is right here in this room today?
Not just in this room, on the stage with us today.
Wait, ilan lang?
Ilan lang yung possibilities, di ba?
parang hindi nila mahuhulaan, Karen.
Ano ba, ikit-clincher ba natin? O
Sige na,
sasabihin ko
game.
na
Kwento
ngayon?
mo na lang kasi parang feeling ko hindi na makakahintay yung mga tao.
Okay, so my course in college was in UP Diliman, which was actually theater arts. And so we had this summer play, and I was partnered up with this really handsome, tall guy. And, that was supposedly my first stage kiss ever.
Tol, hindi na pwede kami nito, Dipet. Girl ako. Okay.
Wait, let me add another detail. This handsome, tall, straight guy.
Okay, oh, straight.
At the time.
At the time.
Okay. And I believe that after that first stage kiss was when he realized, hey, I need to go the other direction. Maybe, ladies and gentlemen, that was Josh Santos.
So that was fun, and then you went into acting and all, and you became a social media influencer, and you felt so strange about turning 30. Can you tell us about that? Because for me, that was a long time ago. How about you, yeah. So why did you feel anxious that you were turning 30? Was this having an impact on maybe viewership or?
It really was. I mean, let's be real, diba? There's really that thing, especially with women in that industry, like if you want to be an actress or a host, you have to kind of stop at a certain age. Like you introduce yourself, hi, I'm Cara, I'm 25, and you've been 25 for like 5 years. And I'm just like, before turning 30, I was like, I have to just embrace this. Because the anxiety and the fear is eating me up. And so that was when I had left the work that I had at the time, which was radio. Parang paaga yung midlife crisis, ganyan. So I started my podcast, which is called After 30 with Cara Erigel, which is essentially just shouting it out to the world that, hey, I'm 30. Kung mawalan ako ng trabaho, di mawalan ako ng trabaho. But hopefully I attract the kind of I guess, job and people in my life that I want and that I need in this season of my life. And so that's how I kind of dealt with the fear and the anxiety of turning 30, was just to you know what, embrace it. And surprisingly, okay naman ako.
Mukha naman. What do you think, guys? Parang okay naman siya.
Yeah.
But I have a takeaway with this because we're here for a public image and branding webinar. How has that authenticity, what's your takeaway on that experience on authenticity when you're trying to project a certain image or a certain brand to the world?
Okay, especially in this day and age, right? During this time, we're right smack in the middle of the pandemic. Everybody is in dire need of human connection, diba? And you can only have that if you are authentic, if you're real, if you're willing to embrace your vulnerability and share that with people, because like I said, that's the only way you can create genuine connections. And I said this to you before because we had a conversation, right? And I was like, okay, this is something that I learned when I turned 30 that I wish I'd learned in my 20s. I do not need to force anyone, people, jobs, people that I work with to love me and to like me. I don't need to change myself. I don't need to act 25 or look a certain way, cut my hair and whatever, just so that they will get me for this kind of work, diba? Lalo na kapag host or actress, you're essentially selling yourself all the time, right? But when I started the podcast, my first episode was actually titled, How Do We Do This? Diba? Bahala na, I don't know what I'm doing here. But then, like I said, as I started doing it, just embracing it, being honest, talking about how vulnerable and afraid I really was, that's when people started messaging me and connecting with me. Not even just people in their 30s, even the younger ones who are afraid to turn 30, even the older ones who are remembering how they felt when they were, in that age. So everybody's experiencing the same fear. And I guess that's what eats you up, is you feel like ikaw lang, ako lang nakakaramdam nito. But it's not true. And the more I embraced who I really was, what my fears were, what I was excited about more, what I was willing to learn more, that's when I started attracting more work even. And the people that I guess I really wanted to work with.
I'm very excited later when we talk about how what that means for Rotary work, right? When it comes to showing that brand to the world, how Kara's experience can translate. And everybody who's listening there in the stream, please comment in the chat box. This feels like a live stream to me. Please comment in the chat box what you think. Our people will look at the comments, and then maybe that can feed into further discussions later with our picks. And Kara, I think with Edric, I mean, for me and Edric, I think a lot of the things that Kara said actually resonated.
Totally.
When we started on the money, we both were newbies. Well, Edric was doing modeling work. I was a print journalist, so we had no idea how TV works. Edric, what was your most surprising experience? What was the strangest thing you learned about media when you started doing the show?
I think the most important thing with regards to media is making sure we go back to our why, right? A large part of what you were even sharing, Kara, about how you felt like you had to prove something, right? When I look back, and even as I look at it now, the why helps define or affect the identity, helps define and influence your motivation, and even creates clarity, you know? So when I look back, as far as identity is concerned, I think the temptation when you deal with media or when you're in it is you can swing one of two directions. You can either feel like it's all about you, right? With awards like Cutest News Anchor, which you said earlier, and the other business awards that the show had, and you know, the doors that opened. There are often times when you feel a little bit more entitled, like, you know, I'm the guy on TV, and it can lead to frustration when people don't give you sort of special treatment. So I think going back to that why helps ground you, right? And makes you realize that actually it's not about you. So my why has been really what you said earlier. I want to help change the world, a family at a time. And even as I got into that personal finance show, I made sure I had that why. You know, I like to say that I'm a purpose-driven professional, if you will, right? So that was my goal. I wanted to bring the message to as many people. Now, the other side of the identity token or the spectrum is you can feel like you're not good enough. I mean, a little bit of what you were sharing, right? How I felt like, you know, I mean, who are we? I mean, I'm not a seasoned news anchor. You know, I'm not a technical investment banker who has all of this dearth of experience. So a part of how I dealt with that is I went back to that purpose and I said, look, it's not about me. And the beauty of that show, which, you know, you've continued to champion onwards, is we get people who can now give that voice, and that's how we can affect change. Yeah. That's why it's so important. And the air of motivation, what I remembered is, you know, when you want to be able to do that, affect change, even if you swing and you're wondering about your identity, it's so important to go back to your purpose so that you can drive yourself forward. So even if I felt like, you know, I don't really know much of these things, I found a way to hustle and learn and develop. And even if, you know, I've loved that network. The budgets were quite thin, as you know. So when I would ask for training and all these things, you know, they were like, Edric, I want to be straight with you. We don't have the budget. So I put money behind that.
Yeah.
And I did that because I was motivated. You know, I wanted to be able to help affect change, and I find a way to do that. And it did wonders for me. And the last is the clarity. You know, I think part of how you introduced me, that whole transition from ANC and the network. I was part of the morning show as it was relaunched, right, to compete against the other business networks. And that was amazing stint I had there. But the clarity that I wanted to wrap up my answer to you with has everything to do with when you know what your purpose is and you're dealing with so many different influences, so many different thoughts, it helps to be able to go back to that so that you know what choices to make and what not to make. So as a dad I have 6 kids now, as you know very well, that's right. I was on kid number 4, I can't keep track. As I was going to the morning show, it was an amazing ride. But they told me, they said, Dad, you're disappearing. You know, we're missing you. And my wife spoke to me, and because of my purpose, which is all about family, how can I go about doing that when my own family seems to be missing their father? So I let go of that. I made the decision because purpose does that. It helps you clarify what choices to make and not make. So I like how one of the influences on me as I transitioned out of that season was when someone said to me, you know, there are seasons in our life where we need to say no to good things in order to say yes to greater things. Being on the show, and that was good, it was amazing, but greater things, you know, family and really pursuing that. So that I look back, I feel a little bit of sorrow, but no regret. because of that. So that's why I think it's so important as you deal with media, as you get into the space, you need to go back to that why, because it will take you through making sure that identity is clear, you're motivated because that's what's driving you forward, and it gives you clarity in decision making.
I think for a lot of people who are listening right now, this has just appeared to me that sometimes we're intimidated by how the media works. We think all the anchors and the newsmen, right, are so unapproachable. They're like not humans. But when you listen to Edric, you realize, yes, guys, we are humans. We have our own struggles with the whys, with
Right.
authenticity, and with the work. And I think the takeaway is that we are all trying to change the world in our own ways. And sometimes connecting with the media and how it works is a good way, really, of expanding your message also. And Tony Bell will talk about that a little bit more later. But Edric, can you tell the audience about what your understanding is or what you learned about how the news cycle works? What would someone do if they wanted to appear on television or on radio? Maybe Cara can talk about that also, so that they can tell their stories.
Yeah, I think first there has to be a compelling story, right? A large part of how the news world works is if it's newsy. So if you have a story, bring it out there, and that will gain traction. I think what is important is that you do not lose. I like how you talked about authenticity, even as you talk about the story, because the media, as they go around it, they can find an angle and build on that. For example, let's talk about the homeschooling space. Part of how the media was able to deal with that is, on the one hand, people were celebrating. On the other hand, people were shooting it down because of socialization and all the negative stereotypes. So how do you deal with that, right? Again, you have a story. Stay true to your story and be prepared for resistance. Right, I think if you are intimidated by people challenging your position or your story or finding loopholes to it, and you get emotional about it or you react, then that becomes another story that they're able to build on. So make sure you stay true, right? I think that's so important.
That's amazing, Edric. Thank you so much. And Tony Beth, it's time to go to the male Black Widow of the advertising world. Talk to us about brands and campaigns and how those are brought forward much faster when you have the attention of the media also. How do you corner that space? How do you tell your stories?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you take a look at how brands are, especially at this time, this crazy, confusing time, it's important to know that brands need to tell that story. Brands have long parang dropped off from just trying to sell their products. A lot of the times you see and you hear about brands who come up and would like to share their products. And a lot of the times the people who try to, the consumers, would like to know a little bit more. So we've been noticing that in the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of the different brands have shared not just their products, but they've shared their story. And even on our end, we're noticing more and more the consumers would like to know about how a brand creates its products. We've all heard the terms organic, free range. These are actually terms that were coined, of course, by the marketing, but at the same time, it went back to the idea of we have to tell why we made it. And to your point of saying, what is our why? It's not just sharing our products, but it's also sharing our purpose. So in branding, there are four key aspects of a brand that we look at. The first one is really people. Okay, you notice if you talk about a company, you'd be looking at the CEO. You'd be looking at someone like Jeff Bezos, for example, or Elon Musk, or Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, that's one part of the brand. There are also different parts of the brand that revolve around the people. For example, the endorsers. So you have the different endorsers for your sports apparel, a lot of the different products as well. That also makes up a part of the brand. But at the same time, even in the simplest form of a brand, you could see the people in terms of the server you have at the McDonald's, for example, or the barista that actually hands you your coffee. So a brand is made out of people. And it's important to know that each person related to that brand is an ambassador in one form or the other. So that's something that's important to brands. The second thing about the brand experience for different types of companies is looking at their products. And I think this is the one that most consumers have a stronger affinity to. My favorite brand is Apple. And I know little about the brand itself, but I do like the products. And I use everything from the watch to the laptop to the iPad. The way consumers get to learn about a brand is through its products. So it's very important that you make sure that the products are good. The things that you share with the public, with your consumers, it's important that they work. It's important that they're of good design, and that allows now people to understand the brand a little bit more. The third one, which we always look at, is the idea of process. So process plays a very important role. As I said a while ago, if you take a look at the words free range or organic or non-GMO, it's important to share that process. And IKEA, for example, IKEA is a good brand that loves to share its process. It tells you why they actually create products that are flat packed, for example, or why you have to do it yourself. So that's a nice way of
Yeah,
reaching
why?
out.
Why?
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly.
Why
I
we
mean,
can just buy it whole.
and IKEA actually did that. They did a campaign about it to share why they did it. It's called the Why campaign, actually. So why do we flat pack our products? And their answer was, the more that they flat pack their products, the more space they save, the more materials, the more products they can actually ship.
Yeah.
And
So it's cheaper.
yes, it becomes cheaper, and the people actually get those savings. So it's that kind of sharing of process that people are excited about as well. And finally, it's about purpose. So purpose, as with the why, the idea of how you create something, a product, a process, a service, but later on you take a look as a brand to realize that there are some things that you can create without having to look at just the money side of it. So WWF, for example, or how NASA says that we are for exploration, we are for the furthering of the humankind, or even something as simple as Netflix, and their purpose is to entertain the world. So it's important to take a look at all these aspects: the people, the products, the process, and the purpose.
So Tony, but isn't it just about wordsmithing? Is it just about being witty? Like, you did this thing for Dimension when President Cory Aquino, after the 1980s, did you know this? After the 1986 revolution, when she came into power, Dimension, the furniture maker, came up with a campaign that asked her, President Cory, do you need a cabinet?
That was you.
That's
That was
witty,
your
right?
line.
Is it just about being witty, using the right words, or is there something more to telling your story through brands?
And I think
Guys, you can ask questions also. Come on, join the fray.
We won't have enough time if I jump in.
I think the nice thing about there is a part of it that's about looking at crafting how you say it, but a lot of the times it goes back to authenticity. If you're true to what you believe in, if you're true about how you treat your people, how you project your products, how you create your processes, for example, and if it's that level of authenticity, it's more consumers are more likely to embrace you. That's why you notice that within a public image, there are brands that you favor a little bit more than the others. So I think the idea of authenticity allows you to make sure that the brand is something that you can attain, something that you can embrace, even if a brand has faults. Because we've heard a lot of that recently. Certain brands have made mistakes with their products, for example. But if you fix the brand, if you start with how true you are, no matter how you make a mistake, I mean, people do make mistakes, so you can get to learn a little bit more, you can get to understand a little bit more. And I think that's the nice thing about how brands can affect change and how people can be brands as well.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, like Kara's story was, she was turning 30, and I was gonna say, is that a parang fault? Is that But no, the
She
older
embraced
you
it.
get, the better, di ba? But the older you get, the better. But I think, I don't know with Cara and Edric, please, we still have time for a little bit more conversation so we can deepen this further. Authenticity is great, but if you don't have excellence in the store, in the product itself, or the process, or the people, then your authentic story is a non-story because it's a palpak yung produkto, palpak yung activity, palpak yung service project, 'di ba? So we need also parang there's authenticity but there's also a lot of effort to be as excellent as you can be. That's the foundation. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has to be a really good mix of being authentic and your why. By your purpose. There always has to be a purpose behind your authenticity. Otherwise, it'll just be you're like someone ranting on Facebook. You're just someone who's completely honest and word vomiting. Diba? There always has to be a why behind it.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's a difference between authenticity and complacency, right? I think that's not what we're saying. Ganito talaga ako. This is how I am, so
Yeah.
take me for what I am. And which is why even in my own sharing, as you deal with them, you need to show that you are pushing, you are motivated, you want to become better. No, I think that's so important. And I think for many interactions, if you understand the main pain point and you're able to provide that or address that well, right, excellently, even as you deal with it authentically, then stronger relationship.
Yeah. So Tony Beth and Edric and Cara, let me ask you about great stories, great campaigns, and big brands that you think has changed the human race for the better. So that our Rotarians who are listening can be, inspired that if we tell our stories better, this year's theme is all about changing lives. What can public image, what can good brands do for the kind of service that we do? Any brands in the back of your minds that, because of the way they told their stories, people's lives got better? Is it that powerful?
Yes, I think at the moment there are a lot of brands there that they're trying, especially because of the current situation, the current pandemic. It's so hard to keep on talking about just products. So, and I agree, it has to be a good product. Facebook and social media in general has already become the biggest microscope for consumers to take a look at brands and tear them down as well. So you have to have a very good story. You have to have a very good product as well. So for me, there are two things. There are experiences and there are stories. Okay, so it's important because on one end, good stories can actually push you to buy the brand, but at the same time, good experiences can actually allow you to be able to tell better stories.
I was gonna say, sana Coke, kaya lang yung brand niya, Pepsi.
Yeah.
No, I've also done
You've
that.
also done work with
I've
them.
also done that.
I don't know.
So,
Sorry, Edric. Just one last. For everyone who's listening, type in the comment box some of the great stories you've seen through campaigns, diba? Like Coke's, they're documenting the smiles of people when they give the bottle of
Yeah.
Coke. I think that gives people more reason to be happy and to smile. Edric, final wrap up. Any thoughts, and then
Yeah, I'll jump in just really quick. What has been powerful to me has been the triple bottom line, right? Looking at companies who engage in not just profit, I need to sustain my operation or make a certain margin, but those that also focus on, as what Tony Pat was saying, the people, but also the planet. So this has a lot to do with even why I like calling myself a change maker, because I like to look at entrepreneurship that has a great social component, right? What is the purpose behind it? So education, we want to help do that. So I resonate with many of the brands that have that. When you look at them, you know that they're trying to do as much as they can to make a good margin, to provide for their operations, their employees' jobs, but they're also very big on people, right? And the planet, making sure what they do is sustainable, that there is a greater purpose to what they're doing. And I want to mention a number, but I don't want to have, associations. So, but that's how I engage them. That's what appeals to me.
All right, thanks, partner. Cara, how about you?
For me, it would be a person and an author. If you've heard of her name's Brene Brown. She's also a writer. She's very good. I
The
love
power
her.
of vulnerability.
Exactly.
I love you.
I I love you too. Exactly. And she has really struck a nerve. Grabe. Grabe yung effect niya for me. And when I actually found out about her, that was when I started embracing my vulnerability. And she in itself, as a brand, is what I also stand for. Right now as a person and for the podcast as well, is to be able to touch people's lives whatever season it is that they're in, and give them a safe space and allow them to say, hey, it's okay, make your mess your message. It's okay to make mistakes.
They're telling me to wrap up.
Okay.
Last question. What do you think? Just one word answers, okay? What do you think the world will be like today if people did not take seriously the responsibility to tell their stories through brands? One word answers. Tony Ped first.
Silence, and
Silent.
silence is scary.
Yes, it is. Baka may multo kasi. Edric?
Fail.
Failure. Yeah. Cara?
Weak.
Oh, those are things that we don't want to happen to our world today. That was our first segment for this afternoon. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. We will come back later on for our second segment with our picks. For now, enjoy this video. That was fun.
The district would like to thank the following: